Hello, and welcome to this AOI Hub update video. In this session, we're going to be looking at some of the recent changes that we've made in the template for file name and folder name naming conventions. I'd like to start by looking at the default position that we take in the template when we create files and folders. I've got here a folder on my computer, C AOI Hub Data, and in there I've got the AOI Hub reporting template that I've been working on. I'm going to open that file now, and I'm going to create reports from the template by clicking on the Create Reports button. Create FATCA and CRS reports. That's created the reports. What it has done for those, it has created a folder in the same location as the template was being run from, using this organization name that's been entered on the config worksheet. Let me show you what it's done. So this is the location that I was running the template from, AOI Hub Data. It's created a folder in this location, Gemstones Investments Group, which was the organization name that I had on the config sheet. Within that folder, there is a folder for the year, and then folders for CRS and FATCA, a folder within that for each version that's been created from the template, and then finally in that subfolder we have the XML file ready for submission and the management report in PDF and Excel format. Note that the file name for the management report is also the organization name as entered, and then we've got CRS info and the timestamp when that was created. So that is the default position with the template in terms of the folders and the files that are created. We also have a setting option in the template where you can specify a different data folder. If I go into the options by clicking on the options cog button, on the first tab, data folder, I can select a data folder location, and that data folder will then be used to save the files into. So if I now update that and I run the reports again to show you how that works, reports created successfully. This is the location on my network drive that I specified in the settings, and it's created now a folder, Gemstones Investment Group, so that's the organization name, and in there the same structure as we saw before, with a folder for each year, CRS and FATCA, the version, and then the actual files. So the actual files and subfolders are exactly the same as the default situation. The only difference is that the root folder that you specified is what is now being used. So that process and that logic has been working successfully for some time. However, we noticed that if we have a very long organization name and possibly also a long data folder, that there were issues with the saving of the files. Microsoft have an overall limit in Windows that a file name cannot be longer than 256 characters. And what we were finding was that with those long file paths and long organization names, that in some cases our file names were too long and couldn't be saved. So what we've introduced recently are a number of settings and functions to help you get around that. So the first thing that we did is introduced a warning. If I go to create the reports now, we anticipate what the file path length will be, and we issue this warning saying that we can't create reports because it's going to exceed that 256 character limit. So what you can then do, you could change the file path, you could change this organization name and see if that shortens it enough. And what we've also introduced is an organization short name. So if you enter any text that you want in there, then we will use that short name when we create the folders and we create the file names instead of using the full organization name. Let me show you how that works. This is the location that was specified for my data folder. It's now created the subfolder using the organization short name, Gemstones. Within that, we have then the year, CRS and FATCA, the version, and when we get to the files themselves, the file name for the management reports is also using the short organization name. So in this case, Gemstones, CRS info, and the date and time. And if you use that, it can significantly shorten the file paths and work around the issue with hitting the maximum length. What I would now like to show you is another setting that we have in the template, which is relevant for jurisdictions that require separate files for each reporting financial institution. So in this case, I've got 3 reporting FIs, and we have an option in the settings in both FATCA and CRS to create separate submission files for each reporting financial institution. As I say, this is relevant for certain receiving jurisdictions that require those separate files. And when we select those options, we create the separate files for each FI. Let me show you how that works. Okay, let's take a look at the folders and files that have been created with that setting. Okay, this is the data folder that I specified, and this time there are 3 folders that have been created, one for each financial institution. And the naming convention that we use by default is the organization name that's been entered on the config sheet, followed by the financial institution name. Within there, we then have the subfolders for the year, CRS and FATCA, version, and then we're into the actual files. And with the file names, note that we've got the organization name dash FI name, then CRS info and the date time. Again, what we were finding is that with a long organization name and longer FI names, this was creating very long file names, so we're looking up for a way to work around that. So what we introduced, in addition to the organization short name, we've also added for each reporting financial institution an FI short name. So within the FI, you can specify an FI short name, and if you use those short names, we will use those short names when we create the folders and the file names for the FATCA and CRS reporting. Let me show you how that works. Okay, let's take a look at the folders and file names that we created now. Okay, so this time, again in the folder location that we specified, and a separate folder for each FI, but note that this time I'm using the short organization name and the short FI name in the folders. If I go into one of these, we'll then have the year, CRS, version, and when we get to the file names, we're also using the short organization name, the short FI name, CRS info, and the date and time. So that significantly reduces the length of the file names that we're creating from the template. One final setting I wanted to show you to complete the picture is that for CRS there is also the requirement in a number of jurisdictions to create separate submission files for each reportable jurisdiction. So if you have account holders that are tax resident in different jurisdictions, then you need to create a separate XML file for each one of those. And we have this option that will create that automatically. That has an impact on the folders and the files that we create, and I'll just show you that now. This can also be used with the organization short name and reporting FI short names, and I'll show you that now. Okay, let's take a look at the files and folders that have been created with that setting. So this is the data folder location. Again, we have a folder for each financial institution because that setting was selected. If I go into one of these, we have the year, VATCA and CRS. If I go into CRS, we then have a subfolder for each jurisdiction. So in this case, that FI would have had some account holders resident in Germany, DE being the ISO code, and Spain, ES there, the ISO code. If I look at the Germany one, that would then have a version subfolder, and within that we then have our files, the XML file and the management reports. And the management report file name is the organization short name because I use that, the FI short name, CRS info, and then the ISO code of the receiving jurisdiction, followed by the date and timestamp. That concludes this information video. We hope that you found it useful. If you have any questions, please get in contact with us.